I do two podcasts here. One of them is on The Bachelor, the reality TV show. And the other one is Wrestling Universe, so on wrestling and WWE and all sorts of wrestling. So it's two different worlds right there. So I'll split my time a little bit with both. We are now in Bachelor hiatus, which is the good time of year for me because this show runs from like January through September, and I can finally breathe because I don't have to watch it every Monday night. Or Tuesdays when they do. So I'm going to do a little recap of what we saw this year. This year's Bachelor was Nick Viall, who was on this show previously about 4 other times. Now, if this guy can't find love, then I don't know. I mean, there's no hope for anyone, apparently, if he's on TV 4 times and still looking. He actually just broke up with the girl he picked, so clearly that was not the objective. But his season was of The Bachelor, which started in January, ended in March, April. It was just like this guy's been on TV so much for the last few years. He's been on 3 other Bachelor shows. So, I mean, he had it down scripted. This guy knew how to act, how to talk, what to do, so the producers would just eat it up. It wasn't the most interesting season, actually. Kind of expected him to be more controversial since he kind of knew the game and how to run it. But the season didn't have that much controversy besides this one woman named Corinne, who was incredibly insane. Legitimately, there could have been a mental asylum that was waiting for her because she either is the greatest villain on television or just kind of insane. Or maybe she just played it all up. But she was a lot to handle, and she stuck around the show a little bit longer than expected. But ultimately, Nick picked a woman who really didn't want to be with him from the get-go, a special ed teacher from Canada, and clearly they broke up. So I actually saw them. I met him at a Milwaukee Bucks game event. And I kid you not, they were sitting in the front row. I don't think they looked at each other for about 2.5 hours. So that was not boding well for their future. Clearly, a couple of months later, they were all broken up. So that put a bow on that season. Then, out of that season, there was a bachelorette, Rachel Lindsay. She was the first African-American bachelor/bachelorette. And she was everyone's favorite on Nick's season. But when she did her season, really we saw a different side of Rachel, a more cunning, cutthroat individual that really didn't present herself that way beforehand. I wasn't a fan of her from day one because she was a lawyer and she acted every bit of it on this show. Definitely took every chance she could to throw guys under a bus that she didn't like. But there was a certain couple that she did. And the drama that ensued was that the guy that she really wanted to be with, Peter, he ended up not wanting to be with her at the end. Either he saw her true colors or whatnot. She almost begged for a proposal, and the guy just said he couldn't do it. So she awkwardly broke up with him on the finale and settled or picked the guy she claimed to have wanted, Brian, who was like this 37-year-old chiropractor who acted a lot more like a 19-year-old college kid who just wanted to flirt with women. So age doesn't mean always maturity, apparently. But yeah, so that was season of Bachelorette. It wasn't a really good one. And that led us into the final one, which was Bachelor in Paradise, which is kind of a spin-off show that it brings back the retreads from both seasons and kind of pairs them up on an island in Mexico. And usually this show has a lot of drama. It's in its 4th season, and this year it had no drama because no one wanted to be there to date. They just wanted to hang out, drink, and be friends pretty much with everyone. So there's like one relationship that came out of it, which I'm probably giving about 2 more weeks till it's over, because that's what happens on The Bachelor. People just date to eventually break up together. But the show is popular. It's more popular than it's ever been. I think social media has a lot to do with it. When you tune on Monday nights, it is everyone's commenting in some way because someone has an opinion out there, and it spreads like wildfire. So that's probably the thing about that show that really made it that popular is the social media interaction it had. Bachelor in Paradise was just really boring. There's not much to talk about it because nothing really happened. Besides this one woman, Christina, who seemed to be the only one there for the right reasons. She had a great backstory. She was like an orphan from Russia that got adopted up in America, and she seemed genuine, like person that really kind of made something out of herself. And she was trying to date this guy Dean from Rachel's season, who was as mature as a 5-year-old, pretty much. So that guy just couldn't. Every time he would just giggle. Like I can imagine a 13-year-old girl would be a lot more mature than Dean was, because he couldn't even utter anything. He's like, "Hey, Dean, I like you." That was his reaction always. So clearly this girl picked the wrong guy, and he just wanted to double date. So he was dating Christina and another one on the side. So Dean ended up alone, thankfully. No one should date Dean. So yeah, that was the season. Luckily, it is now over with till January. They're bringing back, they just recently announced that Ari Lutnick will be the next Bachelor, and his father was a NASCAR driver, or really Formula One, one of those drivers. So the guy has also done that too professionally. So he's kind of maybe a first Bachelor that's actually successful and not just like a model or a wannabe actor. So this guy actually had a career and has kind of made it, and won't need to do it for the money or anything like that. So it'll be interesting to see. And he's kind of older. He's like 35, 36. So same thing with Nick. Nick was in his mid-30s, but they cast a bunch of 22-year-olds for him because he wouldn't want to have anyone over like 30. But yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to check out this January. Will Ari, who was previously on a season of The Bachelor as a contestant about like 3 years ago, so clearly they're running out of contestants to pick that might be worthy. So they have to go back to the vault and bring them back. But we'll see what happens. The show keeps on going, and the same results keeps on happening. No one stays together. People break up immediately. So enjoy it while it lasts for a couple months. So yeah, with that, I will transition to my other podcast, a whole different fan base, a wrestling fan base. Podcast is called Wrestling Authority. And boy, there's been a lot of change in the world of wrestling that's been going on. For those of you who watch the WWE, gone are the big names. Kind of John Cena was on top of the world for the last like 15 years. He was running the show. He was the Hulk Hogan of this era. And now we can see John Cena more in movies and TV shows than you can see him in a wrestling ring, because he is making that quick transition into film and television. For a guy that said he's never going to leave, he certainly has been gone for a while over the past year. But that's a natural transition. That's what happens. That's what happened with The Rock, too. He's one of the biggest movie stars right now, and he was on top of his game in the wrestling world, but it seems like that's becoming a trend. People who are really big in a wrestling world with a lot of charisma and personality are actually making it in Hollywood. And Dave Bautista's another one from Guardians of the Galaxy and many other films that he's doing now. So that is kind of the route that's been happening. The top wrestling stars are turning into like top Hollywood actors in a weird way. Cena is no different, so that opens up a spot for everyone else now on the roster. Whoever wants to take the brass ring, as they call it, and run with it and make themselves the next star has that opportunity, because Cena's been hogging the spotlight for the past 15 years. And now is that phase where the WWE is trying to find a star. They're trying to find their new John Cena, and it's not happening so far. And what is happening is that it's similar to like a sports team where you have like a star player, a Michael Jordan or a LeBron James, and then they leave, and you just have a bunch of really good guys, but not a great guy. And that's what's kind of happening in wrestling and WWE right now. There's a lot of good young talent, and wrestlers are stepping up. AJ Styles, who's almost 40, but he's on top of his game now over the last few years now that he's in WWE. It's given opportunity some other guys that never gotten a chance to come out of their shell and really show their potential. The Miz being one of them. That's a guy that kind of started in reality TV, actually, and came over to wrestling. And he's always had a gift for talking, but he's never been used properly. And now I think we're seeing the best of the Miz and what he can do, because he's getting an opportunity because guys like Cena are not in the way. And there's some other guys that have been around that have made a name for themselves that are kind of being shoved to the side, one of them being Randy Orton, who recently said on a podcast that he hates his character right now in wrestling, which is playing a good guy. So he's a babyface, as they call him. And he's naturally a good heel, a bad guy. And he's been playing the good guy role for over a year now, and he's just fed up with it. And it's showing when you watch the shows, because he looks unhappy, and he just isn't on top of his game. He's not giving the best Randy Orton version that we're used to seeing. But one guy that's emerged over the past half year, I'd say, that really came out of nowhere. It was one of those guys that never even was seen on TV, is Jinder Mahal, who went from a scrub, a guy that loses to everyone, literally, and no one even knew who he was, to being a champion literally overnight. And this guy's rise has been meteoric. He's been on top of his game, and that's the kind of thing you get to see now when big guys like Cena are not around. You get a guy who was toiling around for years, who never got a shot, and now when he did, he's showing what he could be. And he's one of the most entertaining acts right now in wrestling, as Jinder Mahal, actually. And it's really fun to see him kind of growing in front of us and watching us see the best of Jinder Mahal. And I've enjoyed that, because I think they've run this gimmick. They're kind of running the gimmick that, because he's Indian, and the anti-American gimmick, which is always kind of a fun gimmick that will have the audience hating you. But he's doing a really good job with it. He's basically the guy that makes a valid reason why he's not liked, but the crowd absolutely hates him, and he's eating it up. So Jinder Mahal has been a pleasant surprise this year. Another guy that people love to hate, or hate to love, is Roman Reigns. And that's such a controversial guy, because Roman Reigns has been the guy pegged to replace John Cena. He's been the next in line, and the fans haven't been having that ever since they've attempted that. So Roman Reigns really has this tough time of trying to be everyone's favorite while getting booed by everyone besides kids and certain parents, maybe, with the kids, who trying to support their kids because they like Roman Reigns, but anyone over the age of like 15 hates Roman Reigns. And the guy tries really hard, but it's one of those forceful things where you can't force people to like someone. It's got to be organic. It's got to be natural. And that's how kind of Daniel Bryan, who's now retired due to neck issues, had a crazy run the last couple of years with this whole yes chant that really went mainstream in sports and everywhere, because he was just like a normal guy. He related to the fan, and the fans really took that to heart, and they really jumped on his bandwagon. And a guy that was small in stature, didn't look like a wrestler. He looked like someone that could be sitting in this room that could be anyone, but he was on top of the world for a couple of years until his injury. So that's the kind of organic thing. It's best, really, when we have that in wrestling, which we haven't had because things have been kind of forced lately. And you're seeing the results of it. I think the ratings have been slumping, and the people aren't as hot for it as they've been throughout the years. I think the search for a big star has been a big part of that. Not one person standing out and being that big star that everyone's looking for, but also It's just the times are changing, and certainly like what was good before isn't maybe good anymore. I think we're adjusting as a society to everything with social media and just a different way of life. And when you keep things the same, it doesn't necessarily work. And the wrestling business has been crazy in a sense where they love rehashing things from the past. So things that happened 5-10 years ago, storylines, feuds, they like to bring them back. Think that enough time went by that you forgot about them. But it's tough to forget if you've watched this religiously for a long time since you were a kid. And like, wait, I've seen this before, just with different people. Time to come up with something new. But that creativity is lacking these days, and it's hurting the product because you need fresh storylines, you need fresh feuds. The only thing I think they've done really good in the past year is the women's revolution. I think women's wrestling is the best it's ever been. You have some great female wrestlers, one of them being Ric Flair's daughter, Charlotte. She's just tremendous. I mean, she looks every bit part of the athlete that even Ric Flair couldn't be. And he's a legend. But women's wrestling now, especially in WWE, is tremendous. It's probably the best thing on the show because of the athletes that they have, and it's just a revolution that's going on now. I wish the guys could take a tip or two from that and kind of incorporate what the women have been doing. They've been putting on great matches, great feuds, great storylines, and the guys have been kind of toiling. And, we're speaking of that transition with Cena and stuff, like a lot of the favorites that people kind of remember, like The Undertaker, have retired in the past year. So people that kind of grew up with, and it's a different time too. There's a new fan base that's coming around right now that doesn't remember some of these other guys that grew up on John Cena. They don't remember Hulk Hogan. They don't remember some of these guys that really ruled the 90s and 80s. And it's a whole different product. It's so PG friendly these days. It's geared towards kids, really. So there's only so much you can do with storylines. Sure.
So the show Glow on Netflix.
Yep. Glow.
From their 80s.
Yep. Allison Brie.
That show is going to help get some of the people that don't watch wrestling into it, or do you think that's going to...
That's a good question, because obviously Netflix is such a premier spot for everyone to kind of view their television and film, and at Glow, and as a mainstream actor and Allison Brie on it, I think what it will do is will kind of shed a light to people who had no idea about this stuff, even though, women wrestle. And I think the WWE's doing, like I mentioned, a great job now with women wrestling. So I think it might do them good, but the only thing is WWE wouldn't promote that because it's not their own product. They're very much about promoting their own brand and only their brand, and if anything that doesn't correlate with their brand, they act like it doesn't exist. So unless people kind of decide on their own to want to kind of see if this is how it really happens, if this is comparable, what you're seeing on the show. And I'm sure a new fan base is being brought out that's never been done. I think the WB could have had something good here if they wanted to cross-promote it or really, advertise or just for once put their egos aside, because Vince McMahon's got a huge ego. And if it's not his creation, he doesn't want to hear about it. But I think that would help everyone in a sense. I think it would bring in the WWE viewers to check out Glow on Netflix, and it would bring in those viewers that they've started, that they organically found on Netflix to the WWE. I think you can't lose, but you can only lose if you're being stubborn and don't want to try. So I think that's where we are at right now. But that's a great point. Because in a sense, there is that kind of a mainstream thing, curiosity in the sense of wrestling, because even people want to know, like, Dave Bautista, what did he do before Guardians? Well, he was a wrestler for a long time. So I think there's a whole different fan base with The Rock now being so mainstream, and Cena's going to be in the next Transformers movie, Bumblebee, lead guy. I don't know, that's going to play out. But there's that crossover. There's that crossover that is happening right now, more so than ever, with the mainstream Hollywood and the wrestling industry. But if the wrestling industry was more receptive to it, I think a lot more could happen out of that. And they're not doing that. That's why the product is struggling. And We're seeing the same old thing. And, for someone who grew up on wrestling or watch it religiously, that does a podcast and wrote blogs on it, I find myself missing like Monday Night Raw or SmackDown a lot. Like, I'll find a week I'll just not watch either and not even catch up with it on DVR or anything because I know I'm not missing much. And now with the WWE Network that's been around, they have their own Netflix in a sense. They have their own network where you pay $9.99 per month and you get all the programming right there. The core fan base will be tuning in and paying and buying that, but you're also, by doing that, you're kind of secluding the product to one spot. So the only people that kind of know about it are the ones that have been following it for a while. I think the big issue here is spreading the wealth and being open to new possibilities, which they haven't been able to show so far. And until things start changing, the product will keep on getting kind of stale, and not much will be happening with it. And that's the kind of thing that could ultimately lead to a big downfall, where in a few years it could become more so very niche and obsolete. With no stars, that really, we're talking sports or wrestling, that really kind of waters down everything, because stars sell no matter what industry you're in. People want to tune in for stars. People want to see who's on top of the game because they attract. If you're a star, you will get mainstream attention, whether it's wrestling, Hollywood, or any kind of entertainment industry. But if you don't have any, then you're trying to sell us on the product itself. And when the product itself is underwhelming, you don't get much out of it. So that's what's happening, and it's been happening in the wrestling world. And hopefully that changes, because I want to like it again. I want to be a fan of it again like I was, not just kind of a casual observer as I've turned into. And it's kind of crazy. I never knew I would get to that point, but there's more entertaining things out there today with film and television, and sports will always be popular. So getting that fan base, getting the originals like me back to talk about it on a consistent basis is something that they need to do well. And it doesn't it doesn't help. It hurts that the next WWE show in Chicago, when they're coming to Allstate Arena, is on Christmas Day. They're doing a live show on Christmas Day. I don't know who's going to come out to that, because people probably are going to want to spend time with their family on Christmas Day and not go see wrestling at the Allstate Arena. But these kind of decisions they've been making. So it's time to look outside of the box and think about like what you're doing, and not doing live shows on Christmas Day. I mean, you think any of these wrestlers want to be wrestling in Chicago on Christmas Day instead of being with their family? I think not. And I probably won't even be going to the show. So I know friends that won't either, that usually go. These kind of decisions need to change. That's losing out a lot of fan bases. And I want to do this podcast more instead of be talking about The Bachelor too. So I know the next podcast is coming up. Things are getting heated up for that. I'm in my off season, but wish wrestling wasn't giving me an off season. I wish they gave me a reason to talk every week about it. But I will try to do that. Thanks for joining me on this podcast right here live. I know there's a next show. And who's coming up? We have Tales by the Blue Light, right? Yes. There we go. Arc Beetle. Follow them on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at the Jim Alexander. So at TheJimAlexander on Twitter. I'm there. You can listen to my podcast, Bachelor Universe, right here on Southgate Media, as well as Wrestling Authority, also on Southgate Media. Not as updated as Bachelor Universe. You can also follow me on, I have a movie website, so I talk a lot about, I'm a film critic in Chicago I'm a part of a film critics group, the Chicago Independent Film Critics Circle, so you can check out my work there, and on my movie website called Real Talker, realtalker.com, at The Real Talker on Twitter. So movie stuff, I talk about that too. I dabble in a little bit of everything, but check me out there, and continue listening to these podcasts, whoever you may be out there. I know there's a fan base for it. So Tales by the Night coming up. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you are awake now.
All right, let's hear it one more time for Jim Alexander. Thank you, Jim.